So yeah, I was chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool, and I was shooting some b-ball up behind the school when a couple of guys who were, oh, hey team, sorry, I was just telling my mate over there what I got up to this weekend. Didn't even see you come in. Sorry. You would have thought that I'd hear the door open and everything like that, but no, didn't hear a thing. Anyway, I've digressed, sorry. I'm the presenter, and today we're going to have a look at how you can just adjust images using a photo editing software. We're going to be looking at how you play with the color, the light, contrast, stuff like that. So we're going to be having a look at Adobe Lightroom. You might not have Adobe Lightroom at your training organization, but there is a whole range of programs that you can use. Even Microsoft Word and Publisher has options to allow you to play with your images. I know you can play with the brightness and the contrast in Word. It may not be as detailed or as powerful as an actual image editing software like Lightroom can be, or Photoshop, but they'll get the job done. Anyway, I've talked too much, so let's go and listen to me talk some more while I teach you how to do some stuff. Alright guys, so here I have an image that I've opened up in Lightroom. Okay, it's a pretty basic image. It's just a meerkat holding a little meerkat baby. It's a photo I took a few years ago on my travels. So we're going to be using this to figure out how to play with things. Okay, so firstly, we'll have a look at the brightness. So we can see that this image is a little bit dark. We're going to go to exposure, okay, down here on the right hand side. But in other programs it could be called brightness or light. So you click on it, dragging it down makes it darker, dragging it up makes it a bit brighter. You don't want to get it too overexposed. So I'd say that is probably a pretty good brightness. We can see up here the light and color graph. We can see that moving when I play with the light, and that's just telling me what colors are present and how bright or how much light representation is in those colors. So that's how you play with exposure. Just drag and drop. You don't want it too bright, and you don't want it too dark, for obvious reasons. We also have underneath it the contrast. I'm going to take the contrast down, and you can see that it gets quite flat, the image. Whereas if we take the contrast up, it gets quite vibrant. What the contrast is doing is it's creating more of a difference between your light colors and your dark colors, okay? So what it's saying is it's making the brights brighter and the darkers darker at the same time, and that means that your image is going to pop a lot more. So whether or not you want contrast just depends on the image. This is quite a soft moment between a mother meerkat and its meerkat child. So I might actually take the contrast down a little bit just so it's a little bit softer to look at. We also have highlights. So this highlights the bright bits in the image. Shadows. You can take just the shadows in the image without touching the highlights. You can either darken them or lighten them. You can see the difference that makes. Whites and blacks, pretty much the same thing. Plays with the whites and the blacks, deepens or lightens the blacks, okay? So if you're using something like Microsoft Word or Earthan View, something like that, to manipulate your images and to adjust them to meet your given requirements, you might not have the option of blacks and whites or shadows and highlights, but you will still have contrast and exposure, okay? You should also have the temperature. Okay, so the temperature is also a color manipulator. Okay, and what it does is it gives you a shade of blue or a shade of orange. Okay, and this can help you to play with the feel of your photo. So obviously if it's got blue light through it, it seems colder, right? Because blue is a colder color. If you're outside in the cold, you'd have a blue photo to show that coldness. But if you wanted a warmer photo, say you want it to have a bit of a summer feel, you'd put in a little bit more yellow or orange and warm that image up, okay? So that's sort of how you can have a little bit of an extra detail in your image just to give it that much more strength, okay? We also have basic color range here, so tint, you can give it a green tint. Don't know why you'd want to give it a green tint, or sort of a purplish tint. But if you're playing with colors and you've got a program like Lightroom, you'd actually go down into the individual color wavelengths and play with them that way. So you could take down the red, get rid of all the red in your image, or saturate it with red. You could take out all the green or put a bunch of green in. That's up to you essentially. That's sort of your tonal range that we've been playing with there, so the tone of your image. We can also play with vibrance, okay? How vibrant is your color? Is it very vibrant? Not vibrant at all? Or is it just regular? Saturation. How much color is in your image? Is there a lot of color? So you can see that that's changed it just by boosting all of the color pixels in your image. Or you can take all of the color away, desaturation. In this case it's black and white. Black and white is quite striking. I personally love black and white images. And when it's desat like that, black and white, you can still play with your exposure, your contrast, highlights. So there is a lot that you can do with a black and white image. I suggest that you have a bit of a play with black and white. Okay. So we've got all of that. We can also look at sharpening your image, okay? So this image here is actually pretty sharp at the moment, but if it was a little bit blurry, some programs like this one will actually let you sharpen it a little bit. And so that just means that it's, you know, pretty well in focus, but this one is in focus anyway. Let's have a look. We're getting pretty close to the end here, guys. Let's have a look at some of the brushes that you can use, okay? So what I'm going to have a look at is an adjustment brush. Okay, an adjustment brush essentially allows you a little bit of control if you only want to manipulate one certain area of the image. So let's say that I really like the background here, but I'd like the meerkat to be a bit brighter. What I'd do is I'd turn on my adjustment brush, I'd crank up the exposure a bit, and then you just right click, or left click, sorry, and drag it across where you want the brightness to be. So we can see that I've adjusted the meerkat slightly. And once you've done that layer, you can also continue to play with the light levels or the exposure levels in that area that you've highlighted. I'm just going to leave it about there. You don't want, anything too bright or too dark, because it just looks a bit funky. Composition. Composition is quite a big idea. Composition is the idea of what is in your image and how it's portrayed in your image. So you can see this meerkat here. He's sort of bottom right of the image. Normally with photos that you'd see, classically the focus of your image is centered, right in the middle. But as photography and people's tastes and images have changed over the years, so is the way that people have composed their images. So now a lot of people are talking about the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds is basically the idea that you split your image up into 3 pieces horizontally and vertically. And you use this sort of imaginary grid to compose your photo in interesting ways, like the one that we see here. But let's say that we didn't like what was happening in this image. We want the meerkat to be a bit more centered. All we would do in Microsoft Word or Publisher, you'd just go ahead and crop the image, and we're going to do that here as well. So I've hit crop, and we just crop the image to where we want it. So I quite like, let's say there, he's a little bit more centered. We hit enter, and now we've changed the composition of the image. Composition can be massively important and can change the feel of your image drastically. So whereas before it was cropped, the meerkat and its baby had like a lot of space to play in. They looked quite small in their environment. Now they look quite big and important in their environment, and it gives the image an entirely new feel just with the size and placement of the meerkat. It's the same picture, but it feels different. Okay, now let's say we're happy with that image. It's time to export it. Alright, so we like the image and we want to export it. We just go into File, Export. In Microsoft Word or in Publisher it would be Save As, but if you're using something like Lightroom or Photoshop, it would be Export. And once you've exported, you'll come up with a screen that's kind of like this, and it's here that you can give your image a name. So MCAT, short for meerkat. It's a slang that I'm trying to start. I don't think it'll catch on, but I can try, You can also choose specific folders to put it in, and that's always handy for your file management. But by now, you're good at file management, and you're good at naming conventions for images and other files, so I really don't need to go over that, I think. If we scroll down, we can get to some pretty important stuff. We can change the image format. So do we want it as a JPEG, a Photoshop document, a TIFF, a DNG, some other type of image file or format, that's going to be pretty important because you are going to have to convert images into certain files. Quality of the image, so do you want it 50% quality, 100% quality? That's gonna impact the quality of the image, but also the size and the resolution. So the higher the quality, the more pixels the image has, the larger the file size is going to be. So it could be in kilobytes or even as big as megabytes, depending on the quality of your image, as well as your image size. So height and width in terms of pixels or inches or centimeters, I tend to just go in pixels. 2048 by 2048, that's quite a big image, but you could also change it to 1920 by 1080, 350 by 3500 by 3500, 3200 by 3200 is a pretty big size. That's pretty good. So let's go ahead and change that to 3200 by 3200. So there's a massive amount of options for you to play with and control that you can have in your image. You can see here over on the left, I've actually got preset screen resolution files. So if I want to do a high resolution file, something that I want printed out on, say, a canvas, I'd select that, and that has automatically changed my resolution to 4800 by 4800. That is huge. Okay, we've got my screen grade preset, and that's 2048 by 2048. That's perfect for showing someone some photos on a computer or a TV, something like that. And then I've got my social media grade size, which is 1200 by 1200. So it's big enough to look good on Facebook, but it's also small enough that people aren't really going to be bothered ripping it out of your Facebook and using it for any advertising, because it's not of a high enough quality or size to be used that way. And then, of course, when you've picked what you want, you just hit export and it's done. So, honestly guys, that's all there is to it. Nice and easy. The way I look at editing an image is, does it match the instructions that I was given? And do I think it looks good? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, you're done. Export it, hand it in, or put it on your wall, whatever you want to do. If the answer is no, then just keep going, okay? You'll get it right. So, start playing. Have some fun, alright? Presenter, out. But also, a little hint, there is a lot of videos about photo editing online. There's also a lot of forums and websites dedicated to it. It's sort of how I learnt how to edit a nice photo. So if you do get stuck, just have a look at the internet, You'll find some awesome tips and tricks. Anyway, presenter out again.